Welcome to another episode of Purple Insider. Matthew Coller here, and by request, somehow,
Crazy.
Aaron Nagler, Cheesehead TV, returns to the show. But also, this is going to be a joint venture on both of our shows and our channels, Aaron. So here's what I'm thinking. I'll ask you a question. You ask me a question.
It
We'll go
sounds
back
like
and
that.
forth. We'll
It
we'll
sounds a
we'll
perfect
joint interview
volley
this thing.
back and forth, much like I expect we will see on Sunday afternoon at Lambeau Field.
I like it. Okay, how about this? I'll just begin with got a little it's a quarterback controversy, I think, in Green Bay,
All
tearing
right.
the locker room apart. There's a schism that's going on.
No doubt.
Your thoughts?
Yeah, clearly all sorts of drama. This is such a beautiful narrative for Vikings fans to dive into. Obviously, there is no controversy. However, I think there is a lot of surprise outside of the building when it comes to the job Malik Willis has done keeping the ship afloat, so to speak, these last 2 weeks. Certainly, the way he's performed, probably outside and above everybody's expectations, other than the folks inside the locker room. I do think the guys love him, love playing for him. You've seen that over the course of the last 2 weeks. But there ain't a guy in there that doesn't want Jordan Love back out on the football field as their starting quarterback. Now, that said, we don't know. I mean, I know there have been media reports around Love's possible return for this game on Sunday, but I don't think that's a given. I don't think that's a done deal. I do think the Packers will give this the entire week. Obviously, want to keep the Vikings having to prepare for two different quarterbacks. But yeah, I think we're not going to know probably until Saturday, maybe even Sunday morning, if Jordan Love is good to go for this game.
Okay, so don't call me a Malik Willis doubter because I
No,
would never want to be
never.
known as that. But given the situation, having to come in at the last minute and then the adjustment that Matt LaFleur has made, I mean, my observation is the same as Brian Flores's, which is, wow,
Yeah,
what a job.
yeah.
But I'll give you the haters angle over here in Minnesota, which
Please
would
do.
be uh, it's not exactly like you played the 85 Bears and the 2000 Ravens in these last two games, and the
No
Vikings
doubt.
have played tremendously good on defense. But what in your mind has Matt LaFleur done to elevate the offense around Malik Willis to get the most out of him, considering that he was asked to just show up here and play quarterback?
Well, what's fascinating is to see the development and the kind of growth from the first start to the second start, not just in what he was asked to do, because clearly they did push the ball down the field a little bit more against Tennessee, but the way he's commanded the offense, all the intricacies at the line of scrimmage, even. But the run game itself has really obviously supported a quarterback who has a couple starts under his belt, didn't go very well a couple years ago. He looks absolutely like a completely different quarterback in LaFleur's system. And I do think the thing that's heartening if you're a Packers fan, probably maybe disheartening if you're a Vikings fan, is that the Packers have been able to run the ball these last 2 weeks despite the entire stadium, including the opponents, knowing they're going to try and run the ball. And that has not only helped Malik, but I think it would obviously help Jordan Love coming back. Maybe you don't spread it out and ask him to throw it 40, 45 times a game. I do think that bodes well. But now that said, you're right. The quality of opponent, certainly not top tier. Although I will point out, just the week before, the Jets went into Tennessee and they struggled to just come back and win that game with Aaron Rodgers and company, who obviously looked like world beaters against the Pats last Thursday night. I mean, Malik Willis and that Packers offense, they marched up and down the field against that defense. It's not a bad defense, I don't think. I think obviously the team as a whole has performed poorly in Tennessee, especially the quarterback. But yeah, I don't. I you know, I buy the strength of opponent thing definitely. I think with the Vikings, certainly they have played amazingly well on the defensive side of the ball. I do point out though, and something I have talked about quite a bit this week. Um, the Vikings have essentially played 180 minutes of football and have not had a lead for a bit over 3 minutes of that. It's a whole nother world when you're playing from ahead. I mean, that Texans game, you were there, they had a 14-0 lead in the blink of an eye thanks to two turnovers. Now, you have to make those turnovers happen. I definitely give credit there, but you can play very differently when you're able to just get after it, right? When you're able to pin your ears back, get after CJ Stroud, you don't really have to worry because they're trying to come back. And I do wonder if the Packers are able to get on the front foot in this game on Sunday make the Vikings live in maybe a bit of a different world than they've been living in through these first 3 games. To me, that's a big key and probably something that Matt LaFleur tries to do, takes the opening call, coin toss, maybe other than deferring, which is what he usually does. Maybe this is a game where he takes the ball because he wants to get 7 on the board right away. And again, put the Vikings in a place where they haven't existed yet.
No, I think you're absolutely correct. And when you talk about the biggest thing that the Green Bay Packers have done well, it's obviously run the football. And even though San Francisco ran effectively, they couldn't keep doing it because they
Right.
were down in the game. And with Houston, they ran a few times early and then they were down 2 scores, 3 scores,
And
and
they're out
they're
without
able
Joe
to drop like that.
Mixon. Like there's some context here, definitely. But I will say what one thing I did want to ask you about is Sam Darnold's kind of poise in the pocket and his ability. Now, again, it helps to be playing with a lead, but he seems to be playing very well even when pressured. And that's obviously something that bit of a bugaboo early in his career, certainly his first stop here in New York City. But man, he's looked very calm and very in command of an offense that, O'Connell, one of the better offensive minds in the league, no doubt about it. But man, I've been surprised. Has it surprised you? Because I don't think anyone was sitting here expecting through 3 weeks for Darnold to look as good as he has.
I think I would go with it surprised me a little, but not blown away because I went to every training camp practice. And
Right.
as you saw it develop over the offseason, the thing we kept coming back to is he looks like he's throwing the ball on time. And that was the thing that they talked about over and over and over again was hit the back foot, let it go to number 18. And if you keep doing that over and over again, he will catch the football. Sometimes sports is not as complicated as we need to make it. Just
Right.
have just have Steph Curry shoot threes. Like figure out a way to do that. It's the same thing with Justin Jefferson. What a genius Steve Kerr was. He's like, you know what? You should actually do that more. You're really
Get
quite
those
good at
three.
this. I was laughing about an article in baseball about how one of the innovations was they figured out to throw their best pitch more often. You're like, really? That seems pretty smart.
What
Mariano Rivera there knew it for a long time.
What's great is somewhere in the sports stratosphere there is probably a consultant that got paid a lot of money to come up with that result. Like we've concluded after burning through your $100,000 consultant fee that your guys should be throwing their best pitch a lot more. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
I need a raise after
Yeah,
this great
right,
innovation. But I
right.
mean, truthfully though, Sam Darnold has thrown on time and aggressively to Justin Jefferson, and that's really going to get you about 75% of the way there. But you're right about some of the pocket movements that he's had when things have broken down, and this is the biggest concern though for this game against the Packers because that gentleman Kenny Clark has dominated the Vikings in ways that should have had him be arrested at some point. Last
Truly.
year, just ran over them once again. And I think the D line of the Green Bay Packers is right up there on the same level as anyone that they faced. But when they faced Dexter Lawrence interior pressure, he led the entire NFL for that week. And Garrett Bradbury's playing with an injury. Ed Ingram at right guard has really struggled. And so Darnold is going to continue to have to get the ball out quickly. And there's a little shades. This would be where my concern comes from. There's little shades of, oh, I can make a play here. I'm going to do something special. And you go, stop it. Stop it. You don't try to do that. But
Right.
this is where your point comes in. And I agree with you is if he gets behind, is he going to feel obligated to put the team on his shoulders? Because so far he's been able to say, all right, I'll get 5 yards from Aaron Jones. I'll check it down. I'll run a screen. I'll run a play action. If he gets taken out of that space, I do think, to your point, that things get a lot harder for him.
Well, the Kenny Clark point is apt because I kind of jokingly yesterday when I saw that Bradbury was on the injury report, and I think he was a did not participate, if I remember right. But I kind of joked, yeah, he's got an ankle and anxiety from Kenny Clark coming up on the schedule, right? Now, I think any Packers fan will tell you who's watched these last 3 games, Kenny has not started on fire so far this year. If that's a scheme change or what he's being asked to do in particular is not kind of suited to his game, or at least what he's done over the course of his entire career, I can't really say. But I will say, if there is a place for Kenny to get right, it's at Lambeau Field against Bradbury. I mean, you know it. He has absolutely owned him his entire career. And yeah, playing on a bum ankle, I can't imagine that's going to make it any easier. I have to think Halfley will circle that as far as matchups to try and take advantage of. And not just Kenny, but the entire D front, working some of the stunts we've seen that have been really effective. Some of the things they've done to try and free up Rashawn Gary and all the guys up front. But I do think a big, big key is going to be how Kenny Clark is able to get right, so to speak, against Bradbury. Because, I mean, I don't think they've played a game yet where Kenny hasn't made his life an utter hell.
No, you're absolutely right, and you can go back and look at the PFF numbers and see all the pressures and all the grades and everything else. I mean, it's been pretty gnarly for Garrett Bradbury. It's just a guy that size, that speed, that technique is just overwhelming for him. I do think the Vikings tackles have played as well as anybody in the NFL, and this is where we have to adjust those PFF grades with our brain to say they played Brian
Right.
Burns, they played Nick Bosa. You're not allowed to use your brain with those. You just have to yell
Just
about
look
them.
at the numbers and yell about them. Yep.
Yeah,
That's how that
the only
that's
way.
how that works. I will say, it's fascinating to me to go and back and watch the 2 games from last year. Obviously, the Vikings took it to the Packers really good in Lambeau, and then things kinda turned around on New Year's Eve. But it's funny to me to watch that New Year's Eve game and watch Preston Smith and how effective he was. Now, I don't know, obviously, they were starting a backup quarterback and then went to their backup of a backup quarterback. That's gonna affect timing and things like that, but man, it was surprising to see how effective Preston was in that game, and I'm wondering how much they try and get after that matchup early in this game to see. I mean, the young man's been paid. I know he's one of the best, like you're saying, he's one of the best tackles in the league. I don't think there's any doubt about that. But that's another matchup where the Packers, they've got some evidence to say, "Hey, man, you did really well against this guy last time we faced them." Maybe that's something the Packers try again. Every obvious passing down to get a little bit of one-on-one action there and see if Preston can win again.
Oh, and that's the thing. I mean, with any tackle, it's not like someone as good as Preston Smith or Rashawn Gary just gets taken out of the game entirely. And that's why the interior becomes so concerning because you know you're
Mm,
going to get it from Daniil Hunter and Will Anderson, who made a
right.
difference against the Vikings last week. But if they don't have a guy who's at the nose tackle or 3 tech position that's getting in there all the time, you can step up in the pocket. And there were a few times Darnold did, whereas, okay, the rush is coming. I'm going to have to step up a little. But if there's nowhere to step up, and the other thing is too, if he dominates him in the run game, and I really think it's super important for Sam Darnold to stay ahead of the sticks because O'Connell has played a little more LaFleur ball with
Mm,
play actions. And
yeah.
I thought LaFleur truly was brilliant last year with Jordan Love in the play action game and the screen game. Well, there's been a little copycat league over here, I think, with Sam Darnold, rather than just, hey, let's sit him back in the shotgun all day long. So they've played a little more Shanahan-y this season. Are the Packers going to let them actually do that? But I want to know. I mean, you brought up Halfley. For the last few years, I think that Kirk Cousins got so used to everything that Joe Barry was going to do
Oh,
that
man.
he just knew every call before it was even called and was super comfortable no matter what was happening up front.
Super. I mean,
Now,
that's underselling it probably. I'm my one of my guys, Billy and I were talking on the radio the other day. I mean, Packers fans have probably wiped it from their mind, but prior to Cousins going down in that game at Lambeau last year, he was absolutely taking the Packers apart. Like there was nothing they could do to stop him. So I agree. I think the Barry switch is long overdue if you're a Packers fan. I'm fascinated to see how Halfley approaches this one because you saw him kind of release the hounds on Will Levis in the second half this last Sunday. Now he's got a big lead there, and in the past with Joe Barry, it was very much we've got a lead. We're going to sit back, we're going to tackle, and we're going to limit big plays, even though that didn't really even work. But that was the mindset, right? With Halfley, this is our first instance of seeing, okay, I've got a big lead, and I've got a young, struggling quarterback. I'm going to get after him. I do wonder if not a similar approach, but again, it comes back to the fact that the Vikings have led for most of this season. If the Packers can get a lead, does Halfley follow that kind of path? Does he try and get after Darnold a little bit more than maybe his predecessor did?
so how different is it? I mean, I know Barry was just sitting back, and we saw this from Ed Donatel, so there was
Oh,
Spider-Man meme there,
I love that
but
we
just
both have had to deal with Ed Donatel in our lives. That's amazing.
yeah, well, I mean, the Daniel Jones game is kind of like was it 4th and 19
Right.
for the Eagles? Yeah.
Yeah.
He
Oh,
was
fourth
at
and
the center.
26 is what you're talking
Oh,
about. Man,
26.
good
Yes.
Lord.
Yeah,
at
4th and
Donatell.
26.
Amazing.
But Daniel Jones did make a lot of money, so that's good for him. But it's
True.
just, I mean, as far as schematically, like, what is the biggest difference?
I mean, eyes on the quarterback and defensive backs in the box. Those are the two biggest things. No matter what you're calling, as far as you end up in cover three or a cover two or a cover four, it hasn't really mattered. It's about pre-snap, giving you one look, maybe dropping into something else, creating a little bit of doubt in the quarterback's mind. But the vision to the quarterback is entirely different. Look no further than Jair Alexander's first pick six of his entire career last week. Again, eyes on the quarterback. It's a vision based system. It's something they haven't done a lot of in Green Bay in any of the recent past coordinators, whether it's been Barry or Pettin or whoever. It has allowed them to break on the ball a lot better. And you don't have to look much further than the fact that they had 7 interceptions all last year. They have, I believe, 6 now through 3 games. So it is a very different approach. And again, the bodies in the box is a big change too, as far as dropping not just safeties, but maybe nickel corners, maybe bringing in an extra linebacker for a true 4-3 look. But they have been a lot more populated. Now, how much of that do we see this week with Justin Jefferson on the outside? That's a different story. I do think maybe we see a bit more too high kind of in general this week for that very reason. And I do, I can't believe we've gone this long. We haven't talked about, really, we've mentioned him twice, but Aaron Jones. And if you're the Green Bay Packers and you are worried about Justin Jefferson, there's zero doubt about it. But man, you cannot let Aaron Jones get going. I mean, he has looked so good through these first 3 weeks for Minnesota. And the way they've utilized him in the passing game, like we've seen him be utilized by LaFleur in that way. But man, he has picked up right where he left off at the end of last year when he was just ripping off 100-yard games, adding stuff in the air. And his pass protection is on point. I mean, this is a guy who he's going to be, to me, and I've had some people push back on this, but I think he is the whole key to this game for the Vikings on offense, because I don't see the Packers having a singular answer for him. I think he's got to be the focal point, and that leaves you maybe a little exposed with Jefferson on the outside. But man, Jones can hurt you in so many different ways. I have to think he's job number one for this Packers defense.
Right. It's not just Jones and his effectiveness with runs and everything else. It's really also worrying about Jones, because then that's where everything starts to play off of it, and you can get receivers more open. I mean, this
Yeah.
is Shanahan style football, right? But he especially is frightening because when he gets any space, he's getting 5 more yards after
Doesn't take him
contact.
much. Right. Right.
I mean, his
Absolutely.
his acceleration, his quickness, all of it is still
His
very much
ability to
there. But
get skinny. There's so many times where he's got apparently nothing in front of him blocking wise, and all of a sudden he's got a 4 or 5 yard gain because he's able to find the smallest crease and get flip through it and pick you up a positive gain, usually on first down, where now you're not behind the sticks anymore. You're right on schedule. So he's invaluable in that regard, and that's what I mean when I say to me he's the key.
I absolutely agree. There was Wes Phillips, Vikings offensive coordinator, pointed out a 4 yard carry that he said was maybe the most impressive of the day against the Texans, because it should have been a 2 yard loss, and he found a way to get positive yards. I want to know from you, though, about Aaron Jones, your perspective on him, because I have had now 3 weeks of watching him up close, and all those weeks of watching him murder the Vikings. With
Right.
Kenny Clark on the offensive side,
Right.
averaged like 6 yards a carry against the Vikings in his career, so now doing it over here. But when you ask people about Aaron Jones, they, like, get choked up talking about him, coaches, teammates, everybody else. I want the Green Bay perspective on him. Why is that?
I mean, he is just the most authentic person you'll ever meet. I covered him for a long time, got to meet him several times, know him probably about as well as anybody I've ever covered, just as a man. He represented the organization the best possible way each and every moment he was in public, not just as a football player, but as a person. And I think you saw that illuminated in the Players Tribute, article that he released yesterday, and that line at the end about, "I don't have a G on my helmet, but it's always in my heart." I mean, the man carries kind of the ideals and the principles that you want from your professional athletes. And I'm not even just talking about the Packers specifically here, just as a professional athlete. He underlines and italicizes professional, but he's also just the way he connected on the community level, the way he was with the fans. He's top shelf. And I don't doubt for a moment that while from the start whistle to the end whistle, Packers fans will be rooting against him. There's zero doubt there. But I do suspect he'll get a really warm welcome back prior to the game on Sunday. I think he meant a lot to a lot of people. He was one of their best players for a very long time. I just, there's no place that or person I've ever met who would say anything other than glowing things about Aaron Jones.
There's multiple instances that I've noticed from him where he's asked to chip block, and I tweeted about this the other day, where he's asked to chip block, and he sends the guy flying back like 5
Oh
yards,
yeah.
leaving his feet, chip blocking, nose tackles, and just like
Right.
that's the effort level. That's something no one is gonna really think too much about. It's a running back. He's 5'9", and yet he's like putting his soul into a chip block. And I think that's just the way that he plays.
Don't look much further than the Cowboys playoff game last year where and Jordan Love talked about this at the Super Bowl when he was on Micah Parsons' podcast. Parsons was like, there were so many plays where there is no way Aaron Jones is supposed to be here. There is no way it is designed for him to be in my face. Yet Jones repeatedly knew where Micah Parsons was going to be and took him on in the hole. And there's one hilarious play where Jordan Love has to take the ball over Aaron Jones with his, because like Jones is exactly not where he's supposed to be, but that's where the pressure is. And he picks up the blitz or the pressure, and Jordan Love completes a big ball downfield. So yeah, it's a highly probably underrated part of his game, but it's big. And to your point, he knows how to use his leverage. There's nobody on a football field that scares him. He is going to step in there and he's going to get his nose bloody and he's going to make sure his quarterback is protected. No doubt.
It's funny because I feel like Packers fans and Vikings fans can shake hands over Aaron Jones. Like
Absolutely.
everybody appreciates him.
How can you not appreciate
What?
the guy? No doubt.
All right. What else you want to ask me? What do you got?
Well, I think the number one thing we've talked a lot about Packers offense and their approach and the Vikings offense, but when it comes to the Vikings defense, we've heard a lot of praise for Flores for good reason. They are playing out of their minds. All of the kind of exotic stuff, but it's fast. I saw one stat yesterday that kind of blew my mind. They are blitzing on 60% of second downs. Like, what planet is he living on? I mean, now some of this I would suspect is like, again, they're getting teams behind. They're living in a world where they can dictate. And that's why, to me, my question is, how have they been stopping the run in general this year? Because this is another game, much like the last two, where I think everybody in the building is going to know, okay, the Packers want to run the ball, including the Vikings. How are they going to stop the run?
Yeah, I'll let you know when I see them have to do it. I mean, that's really been the remarkable thing about I mean, they get down 3-0 to the Giants because they fumble on the opening
Right.
sequence and then are never down again in that game. And you talk about blitzing on second down, but when the other team's down 21, you're blitzing
You can just
whenever
go. Exactly.
right? And CJ Stroud, the thing is the crowd noise was so much for CJ Stroud last week. He had never been here before and they let's just send everything,
Flores
right?
had him in hell, man. I mean, he's a good young quarterback, but he had no idea what was coming for him on that afternoon. There's zero doubt about that.
Right, exactly. So they're not going to be able to do it the same way against Green Bay. And obviously, the fact that Green Bay can run so effectively, you can't just be sending blitzes and blitzes and blitzes all the time. So it's going to dictate that. But if there's one concern, I think it is how they're going to stop the run. The big addition this year, which has not been talked about at all, nor would you expect it to be, is Jerry Tillery on the inside. But draft nicks remember him as a first round pick that hasn't worked out. But
Right.
he's sort of developed himself into a nice role. And what you see them doing a lot is 5-man fronts. So you'll have Tillery, Harrison Phillips, Jonathan Bullard, and all of these guys are not household names, but they're all run stuffers and they're big, giant dudes. And I think that allows Jonathan Grenard and Andrew Van Ginkel to kind of cook on the outside and
Right.
line up way wide. It's that old wide 9
Yeah.
thing where they're like
Van
way
Ginkel, former
outside.
Badger, making a name. He has a sack every game, doesn't he?
He does. And honestly, he is a fascinating player to watch because he lines up in so many different places, does so many different things, and he's so bendy and fluid as an athlete. He has just been a complete game changer for this defense. So he's going to play physically, but the concern a little bit is at the linebacker position. Ivan Pace has been banged up. Kamu Grugier-Hill is even banged up, and he's not a guy that you really want out there for 60 or 70 snaps in a backyard brawl because he's an undersized type of linebacker, and even Cashman is not the biggest run stuffing guy. I do think that is the biggest concern. And when you can catch a team being a little over aggressive and, they like to drop people back and things like that, if they do catch them that way, I think that the Packers can run effectively against this defense.
Yeah, I'm wondering how much they employ Harrison Smith down in the box in this game. I mean, I know he moves all over, obviously, but I think he's a big component for Flores this week. I would suspect anyway, and maybe that makes it the fact that he won't do that because maybe that is what's expected. But I do. I mean, look, you watch him play, and it's like he's been in the league for like 100 years, and he looks as fresh as ever. Now it's early in the season, I get it, but man, he is playing lights out ball still this deep into his career. I mean, what a chess piece! And I do suspect, yeah, if you're sitting at and watching what the Packers have done the last 2 weeks, you're going to need bodies in the box. And even if it is Jordan Love out there, I think the Packers are going to be committed to the run. It is about how can you generate those few shot plays that we've seen, even with Malik Willis in there. Can you be judicious with them and find moments where maybe the Vikings are having to overcommit to the run game a little bit, just because the Packers, I suspect, will be somewhat effective on the ground.
Yeah, and I wonder about just if there's any personnel tweaks that get made out of concern about the run game. If there are players that end up in the game a little bit more, they have a guy named Taki Taimani who is a hulking human being. He's not quite Gilbert Brown, but he's
Okay.
kind of like that.
Few people are.
Exactly. But in terms of the pass game for the Packers, though, before the season, I saw all of you green nerds talking about how it's okay not to have a number one wide receiver. Who would want that? Which, of course, the
Now,
franchise.
wait a second. Nobody said
That's
who
what
would
you were
want
saying.
that. We all said they don't have a number one and they don't need one. Not who would want that. I mean, we had Devontae Adams for a real long time. That was okay. I enjoyed it. But now there's no need to force a guy into being the number one when you got a bunch of guys who are really talented and can all get open and all kill you at any given moment. I like both. It's fine.
Fair enough. Maybe I misframed that slightly to make fun of you. It's possible.
No, never once.
But I was sort of laughing at like, who needs Devontae Adams? I mean, but I think you do have one. And I think his name is Jaden Reed. And I thought that last year when he played against the Vikings. So it was no number one wide receiver like a fox. I think he's the guy. Am I right?
Production-wise so far, yeah, they've certainly wanted to get the ball in his hands any which way they can, right? And it hasn't just been through the passing game. They've even handed it off a couple times. They've thrown screens, things like that. It's fascinating, though, because then teams, again, we talked about this earlier, are going to start keying on him. And I think we started to see a little bit of that against the Titans, where all of a sudden Christian Watson is up the field and he's got 2 explosive plays on you because you are probably a little more worried about Jaden Reed than you were previously. So, I mean, Jaden Reed's going to get targets. I mean, he led he led the team in receptions last year. I don't see that slowing down this year. He can be utilized in all sorts of different ways. From a lot of the work he does is from the slot, but they can also line him as a traditional perimeter wide receiver, and we've seen him work from the backfield. And of course, they use him all over the map as a motion guy and get the ball in his hands off that motion. And then here's the other thing. And then all of a sudden you're like, okay, here he comes, here he comes, here he comes. And then he releases out and he blocks like he did on Malik Willis's touchdown on the opening drive last week. He's all over the place. He's a consummate, pretty complete football player. And, is he the quote number one? Well, he's being targeted a lot and plays are being drawn up for him. There's no doubt about that. We'll see how that, continues throughout the year as defensive coordinators have more tape, try to probably take some of that away. I suspect we'll see other guys start to get a little bit more involved. But yeah, as a target, he's probably their, most often kind of play drawn up for guy.
My audience has been annoyed at me for giving the Packers too much credit for saying things like that I think Jaden Reed is quite good. So I want to direct the conversation to bigger picture here.
Mm-hmm.
The Packers They give a mild salary to Jordan Love in the
It's
offseason,
a bit of one, little
which is
one.
not too bad
Yeah.
of a contract. And of course, Vikings fans are a little bit still recovering from what it was like to have an expensive quarterback and have to try to manipulate the salary cap to keep your team competitive. I wonder about how important this year is for the Packers to win as it pertains to that contract, because it doesn't, as you know, if you have Aaron Rodgers, it doesn't matter as much because he
Mhm.
can get you over the hump. I'm not ready to declare Jordan Love quite Aaron Rodgers yet in his prime. But we all know that there is a factor here with how you build around a team, that teams kind of aim for these windows. With like Detroit, they're in their window. They've paid
Yeah,
everyone. It's going to get
definitely.
harder eventually, but for the next 2 or 3 years, they can make it happen. Where does this sit as it pertains to that contract?
Yeah, I think there's no doubt they're intentional in the contract that they handed Jordan, while so much of their offense, especially, is on the rookie deal. It's not a happenstance that, while Jordan is, on the upper echelon as far as quarterbacks getting paid, they also have the cheapest offense around him. And that's not to say they're not talented, but they are dirt cheap comparatively. Like, I think all their wide receivers are making less than most of the guys in the top 10 singularly. You know what I mean? As far as the wide receiver position. So they're going to have to start making some decisions. There's no doubt about it. I mean, Christian Watson and Romeo Dobbs are probably both looking to get paid this offseason. The nucleus will be there for the next 2 or 3 years. And I do think, yes, no doubt it gets tougher as you go, guys wanting to get paid. But we also know that every time one of these guys gets paid, especially, Jordan Love, he was the quote highest paid quarterback for what, a month? Until Dak Prescott happened. That will happen again next offseason and then the next offseason until he's not even in probably the top 5 or 6. I understand kind of the sticker shock thing, and the Packers will have to make choices. There's no doubt about it. But ultimately, it's the cost of doing business when you have a really good quarterback. Now, to your point about him not being Aaron Rodgers yet, you are absolutely 1,000% correct there. He has a lot of growing and developing to do. But as I've said for the last 10 plus years while I've been doing this, you don't pay a guy for what he's done. You pay a guy for what you expect him to do. And the Packers expect him to continue to grow and develop and become better and better. And that's a scary thought if you're the rest of the league, because this guy looked pretty darn good down the stretch last year. So yeah, there's no doubt there will be tough choices along this road with Jordan Love's contract and with, having a superstar quarterback. But, again, it's something the Packers seemingly have planned for, and they certainly feel like they have a roadmap as far as what they want to do, not just on offense, but with the entire roster and the way they're going to have to build around
So one more Jordan Love question for you, and then you get one
him.
more,
Yeah,
and
I
then
get
we'll do
one.
the whole who's gonna win? Is it my
Right, right.
team or
Very
your
good.
team? We'll
Very
do
good.
that.
Very good.
Okay. With Jordan Love though, you alluded to areas he needs to improve. What do you need to see from him the rest of the way? And I still think he's going to play in this game, but I don't know for sure.
Yeah, I
What do
think
you need
there's
to
a
see from
really good
him
chance. Really good
to
chance.
to to walk out of this season saying, "Okay, contract's good, we're all set here"? Because I've got to think in Jacksonville they're going, "Wait, what did we do?" With Trevor Lawrence at this moment. So what needs to be better?
Well, just consistency, especially for the layups. Like, we've seen so many amazing throws and plays and big touchdowns and things like that, or even like things he's done with his legs and escaping pressure and making plays outside the pocket. Those have all been there. But man, there are some layups. He missed two in Brazil that are just mind-numbingly bad, as far as having a guy, he had Jaden Reed screaming wide open on a deep over route and just bounced it in front of him. I mean, those can't happen. You are way better than that. And it's something we saw at times last season. You don't have to look much further than the Giants game on Monday night. He starts that game really poorly, and now he eases into it and he gets hot late. It's not quite enough to win it, but those are the things where, and Aaron Rodgers used to talk about this all the time, talking about young quarterbacks. It is about finding that consistency and finding your greatness, as far as if you are going to be a great quarterback, it's doing all of those things on a consistent basis, because a lot of these guys have all sorts of talent and they can make wow plays. But okay, you're not asking them to do wow plays consistently. I'm asking you to play quarterback consistently, down in, down out, week in, week out, season in, season out. And Jordan's just at the start of his journey. It feels weird because we've been talking about him since 2020 when he was drafted, but he sat obviously for years. And now he is just starting on that journey. So I do think there'll be some impatience. I've already seen grumbling from Packers fans about his performance in Brazil, even though I would go back to that game and point out some 3 or 4 amazing plays he has. But yeah, it's about finding consistency. That more than anything else is the number one thing he needs to kind of find, improve on, whatever you want to call it. That's where he's going to start separating himself and become truly great. And there's a ways to go. I don't expect this to just click, anytime soon. I think we're going to see him continue to have ups and downs. I think that's going to happen with any young quarterback. But yeah, that to me, that's the major thing that the Packers are undoubtedly looking for, right? Like I said, they expect him to grow and develop, and that's going to be part of it. I'm going to switch it around then and ask you, can Sam Darnold become the long-term answer here? They just signed or drafted a young guy who obviously is out now for the season. Can Darnold take this thing?
I think we're working through that at the moment.
Right. I mean, it's a legit question, right? As well as he's played these first 3 weeks, and I understand it's a long season, but he looks good. He looks like a fit. I don't
The
know.
thing about Sam Darnold is, if he
He's
was
Sam
coached
Darnold.
by
No,
Matt,
I'm kidding.
but if he was coached by Matt LaFleur with Jaden Reed and a run game and all those
Right.
things from the outset of his career, I think you might be talking about him having $50 million right now in his pocket,
Right.
because we've seen all the talent that's there. It's very unusual that you pick up a guy who has failed in other places and he makes you think that's even possible because he has the arm and he has the scrambling ability and the physical skill set to do it. Normally, it's someone like Ryan Fitzpatrick where you're like, everyone loves him, but like, who's the next guy?
But he's always going to
It's
come up short. Yeah. No
right.
doubt.
That's not what this is, which does add a layer of intrigue to it. And I think that as the season goes on, we'll get clearer and clearer on that. Like, was this just a hot start and then it's going to be a roller coaster? I don't expect him to be bad, but I think that there will be some down moments, some 3 interception games where we'll go, oh, yeah, okay, well, this is the reason. But if it stacks and stacks and stacks, and we get to the end of the year and it's Vikings at the top of the NFC North, and Packers fans are going, how did they do it? This is just like Randall Cunningham.
Oh, God. Don't remind
Well,
me. Jeez
yeah, I
Louise.
mean, if that's the case, I mean, if this team looks like a legitimate Super Bowl contender, then you have to have that conversation of what do you do? And actually, you could look at with the Packers, where I think they expected to move on from Rodgers. Then he went and won MVP, and you're like, well, maybe what
Now,
Jordan
hold
Love,
on a
let's just
second.
wait. Right. Yeah.
Right.
But
Right.
they were very much sold on McCarthy, and so was I during training camp and preseason. I did not expect him to grow as much. His leadership capabilities are there, but I mean, you're still talking about if they are to win, and this is going crazy down the
Way,
road.
way down the
If they
road.
win,
Yeah.
but if they win 13 games or something, how can you say, all right, well, thanks for the memory, Sam, and now on to someone who's never done anything? Like, that's
Yeah.
a hard thing to do.
Right.
So that conversation may be around the corner, but I'm not anywhere near it yet.
Okay, I have one other less big picture question, way more about this game on Sunday. Is Jordan Addison going to go? Because I see that he's dealing with the injury and he's limited at practice. I mean, the last couple times these two teams have faced off, I don't think, if I remember right, they haven't had both Jefferson and Addison on the field for the last two games that they've played.
Very, very possible. I mean, Kevin O'Connell's been really positive about his chances of playing, and I mean, he could be just sandbagging here by
Right.
having him limited.
NFL coach?
Um,
No. Get out of town.
well, not and not that the Packers would do this with Jordan Love
No,
status
never
at
once.
all.
No,
No
sir. Absolutely not.
gamesmanship between squadrons. I don't think
Surely you
so.
jest.
But I think that he will. He's had this injury before, and it's usually 3 to 4 weeks where he comes back. But the fact that Jalen Naylor has emerged as a key receiver for them and is a route runner and is a ball tracker, and they've been able to use him down the field, it's really mitigated the effect of Jordan Addison being out. But if I were to guess, I think you're going to face the closest the Vikings have been to being healthy here since the first couple of quarters in New York. And then, of course, also Johnny Munt is becoming a fantasy because he's scored a touchdown last week, a fantasy
Love it.
pickup
Right.
now from week to week. So watch out.
Madman Munt Anybody who knows that reference, I'm very impressed. But okay, let's get down to brass tacks. I don't really give predictions, but I will say this: if the Packers get out to an early lead, they win the game. That's to me the whole key about this. We've talked about it a lot. Is playing with a lead is a very different world. Whoever gets that kind of 2-score lead, I think is going to eat. And I hope being in Lambeau that plays into the Packers' possibilities here. But I don't discount the Vikings' ability to come into Lambeau and take one, much like they did last year, and have several times in their recent past, right? But I do think that's a world they haven't lived in yet. And if the Packers can get them there, I think they can win the game.
And I think that if the interior of the D line does not destroy the Minnesota Vikings, that the Vikings have a good chance here. And I also think that if it is Jordan Love, that getting him to test that knee, trying to throw kind of kitchen sink at him early in
Right.
the game and just say, are you ready? Are you comfortable with people flying at you here? Because that's what they're going to be able to do. That's where you get an early turnover or something else like that. But how about this game? I'm driving down there. I'm gonna look at the fall leaves changing. It's gonna be like 75 degrees. This is not Lambeau. It's gonna be a pleasant drive, but this is what I asked for.
Nah, I just wish that, we could have this game a little later in the season. A little bring those dome merchants to a cold weather environment. But it's still Lambeau. It's still going to be hopping. And the fact that it's the gold package crowd, the Milwaukee crowd going to be in the house, I expect a lot of Vikings fans to be there too, unfortunately.
Uh, I do as well, as there always are. So it'll be a super fun game, and I really appreciate coming on Cheesehead TV because I know you folks like to keep an eye on
It's
what
crazy.
they're doing over there.
Matthew, when you sent me the message with the person saying, "Are you going to have Nagler on?" You could have knocked me over with a feather. The fact that you guys keep wanting to hear from me is amazing, and I appreciate it. And Matthew, I appreciate you for reaching out and for having this convo. Thanks so much, man.
100%. You do a great job, and I'm really, really glad we could get together. So best to you, and we will talk again. I guess in December then. Nagler.
December it'll be. Looking forward to it. Thanks a lot, man.
All right, sounds good.